We could power all of the housing units in the United States off of an area filled with 400-watt solar panels, roughly about 12% larger than Rhode Island. Let me explain. With a single 400-watt solar panel, within a 12-hour span, we generate 4.8 kilowatts of energy. Per hour, one 400-watt solar panel will generate 0.4 kilowatts. That's crystal clear energy, straight from the sun. Kind of like Ice Mountain water. Only instead of Ice Mountain water, we have the sun's energy. Specifically the purity of the energy. Subconsciously, every day we're using fossil fuels to power our devices. Cars, gadgets, cell phones, all of the things that make light or run off of some form of fuel. But we could power all of the US off of some solar panels. Let me explain. First, I need to go over how solar panels work. Basically, what a solar panel does that's sitting on your roof is it converts sunlight into usable energy. In this image I'm showing on the screen now, there will be the sun shining photons down at the solar panel, creating DC current. The protons that are coming from the sun hitting the photovoltaic cells in the solar panel are exciting the molecules inside the solar panel, releasing their own electrons and running through the cabling on your roof into the inverter. The inverter creates that direct current, which is known as DC, and alternates it at a rapid pace and changes it to alternating current, AC, which is what things like your lights, cameras, and phones charge off of. That's what comes out of your wall. Now, once it's converted to AC power, we can do a couple things with it. We can either A, send it directly to your house for the light switch, B, send it to a battery bank to be stored for the evening when we don't have any sun out to create energy, or C, it can be sent back into the grid. Now, I'm sure you're asking yourself at this current point, why don't we have more solar? Well, companies like Tesla, for example, do offer solar installation. But through some independent research that I have found, it would cost for a 2-story, 2,000 square foot house, which is a footprint of about 1,000 square feet, between $30,000 and $60,000, with the price ranging from a pretty nice Prius to a base model Tesla. That's a pretty big gap. Now, there are government incentives that also help out with the cost. For this specific instance that I'm speaking of, it covers about $10,000. Another reason we don't have more widely available solar energy is because of the storage. Solar panels are actually more efficient than what they're rated at. So if I have a 400-watt solar panel on my roof, in ideal conditions, it can generate over 400 watts. 400 watts is the labeling on the panel that the manufacturer gives for its recommended rate. There's multiple different ways to store that energy once it's collected. Typically, you use batteries. In this case, we would have multiple warehouses for the United States entirely that would hold the energy. It would be collected and dispersed across the nation. How much solar do we need in order to power all the housing units in the United States? Well, according to the EIA.gov, on the high end, we use around 14,000 kilowatt hours of energy annually. It ranges between 6,000 and 10,000 on average, but I'm going to use the higher end in order to get A, give myself a little leeway, and B, to give a safety net for all of the new devices such as electric vehicles and other fancy gadgets that we have currently and are growing more closer towards and accustomed to in the future. So we take that 14,000, the real number is 14,302, times what Data Commons has provided us from the 2020 census, which is 140 million housing units. So 14,000 times 140 million equals around 2.01 trillion kilowatt hours of energy annually. Now that's a gigantic number. I will not disagree. But let's take our giant 2.01 trillion kilowatt hours and divide it by 365 days. Now what we need to do is create 5.5 billion kilowatt hours of energy within our 12 hours of daylight. But as you and I both know, that's not entirely possible since we have this thing called daylight savings and seasons. So we can calculate how many solar panels we would need in order to generate that 5.5 billion kilowatt hours. The average size of a solar panel is about the size of a twin bed, 80 inches by 40 inches. So let's take Missouri's shortest day, for example. It's roughly 9 hours. What I'm going to do is I'm going to chop off another hour. So we have to generate 5.5 billion kilowatt hours within 8 hours. How are we going to do that? Well, let's divide it one more time. We're going to take our 5.5 billion kilowatt hours and divide it by that 8 hours of time in which we need to generate it all. That gets us to 690 million kilowatt hours. Still a big number, I know. So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to divide the output of the solar panels, which is 0.4 kilowatt hours. We're going to divide that number by our 690 million, which would equal 1.8 billion solar panels. Now, we're going to take our quantity of solar panels we need of 1.8 billion and multiply them by their average size, 2.5 square yards. Once we multiply those numbers out and divide them, we get 1,371 square miles, which is 12% larger than the size of Rhode Island. According to RI.gov, the size of Rhode Island is about 1,200 square miles. While solar panels are not the most efficient thing in the world, in ideal conditions, we can generate more than they're rated at. But more importantly, we have a faster transfer of energy. Now, I'm not telling you to have everyone move out of Rhode Island, but what I am saying is there's a lot of desert in the United States. And I'm pretty sure we could find about 1,400 square miles of desert in order to power all the housing units in America.